This was the moment that I realized that something had gone a bit wrong in the way that I was building this startup. I stood up from a meeting with my investors and I collapsed. I was suffering clinical exhaustion, and even when I was taking, begrudgingly, a day off to relax and recuperate, I still couldn't get far enough away from the idea of the startup.
Hello and welcome to the Reflective Impact Entrepreneurs, the show that explores the stories of founders who listen, experiment and reflect as they build ventures that do good and do well. I'm Umi, and in each episode we meet some of those founders. Today I'm joined by Ivy from TooWrite. For listeners who may not know you yet, please introduce yourself and share what was the one thing you were trying to change and why we needed TooWrite in the world.
Yeah, so I'm Ivy. I was the founder and CEO of TwoWrite, and our main mission in the world was to make scientific writing and publishing faster and more accessible for scientists. We had a very organic start. I didn't mean to create a startup, but once we realized that this is a thing and it helped, it worked, we knew that we needed to get it out there, and the best vehicle for that was a startup. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding there. It was only 2 months after our first soft launch of our first beta product that we were acquired by Springer Nature. Now, for those of you who don't know, Springer Nature is the big cheese of the scientific publishing world. They are the Google of our industry. The moment I got that email from them, it was like, this has got to be a scam, right? I can't have an email from Springer Nature in my DMs right now. Um, so yeah, we exited to them in December 22, and I'm now their director of innovation. I build new things, I support the growth of new things. And then beyond that, I'm also a startup mentor. So I'm happy to help out, particularly first-time founders.
Oh, thank you so much. Wow, what a journey since you started, and we're
Yeah.
going to get right into the kind of the whole journey and your experience over the course of this discussion. So, Ivy, what was happening in your world that made this problem impossible to ignore when TwoWrite came about?
Yeah. I mean, so my partner and I, we were both doing our PhDs. Mine was in literature, his is in computational biology. And because we wanted to hang out as much as possible, we would get together in his flat in Angel and we would co-work. So I'd be, typing on my laptop on his bed, and he'd be at his desk, like with his big computer. And he had done incredible work over the course of his PhD, unbelievable work in pancreatic cancer. And that that ended up not being the hard part, if you can believe that. What was the hard part was writing up his thesis at the end of it, which sounds absolutely beggars belief, but it had been, what, 6 months? And he had maybe 5,000 words down, and they weren't of publishable quality. And for those of you who know what, research funding is like, there is a specific there's a limit on that funding. And at that moment, his funding was running out. And so that kind of brings us to that day, the day that we were co-working together. So I was one end of the room, he was the other, and I just heard fists slamming down on desk going, I can't do this. How how are you even supposed to write a literature review? I don't understand it. And he had done all the scientific courses, he had tried every resource out there, but it just was not working. It was not computing. He's dyslexic, he has ADHD, he's dyspraxic, and all those things made him an incredible scientist. But now here was the world asking him to be a great writer, which is so out of his wheelhouse. So we tried a few different things. We tried a few traditional methods. He'd write a page, I'd edit it, and oh my God, y'all, it was taking me like an hour per page. It was like trying to finish somebody else's half-done knitting. You untangle it, and you're trying to see like if all the threads are there, then you're trying to knit it back together with like second-hand materials. It was a nightmare. Couldn't do that. This thing needed to be like 20,000 words. I wasn't doing that one page at a time. So he was like, okay, so how would you write a literature review? And And I explained it as simply as I could. It's like, oh well, it's quite easy. Like you're doing chronological ones. So think of it like a timeline. You do this bit and you answer these questions like what came before, what came after, what does the future look like? And he just looked at me and scoffed and was like, well, it sounds easy when you say it like that. So I wrote it down into a visual timeline. It was more like a questionnaire. And I kind of sent him off with it thinking, well, it might help, probably won't hurt, but who knows? He came back after 12 working hours, having written 15,000 words. I compare that to 6 months and 5,000 words. That was the moment. That was it. And we're like, huh, what if every scientist had this? What if what if every scientist could write a paper in like a week instead of 18 months? How much faster would science go if the second you have something, boom, it's out there in the world? What if instead of scientists being asked to be brilliant writers naturally, using all these teaching tools that I'm sorry, they are so geared towards neurotypical brains, I can't even. What if they didn't have to deal with that? What if it could be fast? What if it could be accessible? And after a few more tests, that was when we thought, yeah, we need to get this out there. We can't ignore it. We can't just sit on this and say, well, that was a good tool for algae, but I'm now going to put it in a cupboard where nobody else can get it. That was the unignorable moment.
Yes, and for listeners, Algie's your partner, who
Yes.
who was in the room banging his fists on the table, and you were like,
Yeah.
"Well, I've got a solution potentially here," and that's amazing. It's a, like the lived experience journey through to what you created is phenomenal. From the moment you realized that you were onto something and you exited to Springer Nature, how long was that time period?
Oh my God, that was about 2 years. So I went from being a literature PhD student to suddenly needing to be the CEO with what I felt was a really important mission. So from knowing absolutely nothing to getting venture capital funding by BGV to exiting to Springer Nature. Yeah, it was about 2 years, maybe 2.5, but 6 months of that was, acquisition, contracts, lawyers yelling at each other. So yeah, 2 years.
Wowzers. And I remember working on with you and well going through the early prototypes. They were
Yeah.
they were phenomenal, and we'll get into that later into kind of the experiments. But they were good times, and we were all online as well, weren't we? I think it was like deep lockdown, wasn't it as well? So that was
Yeah.
a journey in itself. So you shared the moment it became impossible to ignore, and I'd love to explore how you started kind of tuning in, and you did mention that it was your partner whose pains and desires you were kind of open to that, and you sensed that there was a need there. Um, and you also talked about how you built, if you like, an early prototype, right?
Yeah.
It was like boxes and arrows, and this is the process, and go away and do it. And he came back with a whole lot of a lot more work than he had done previously in a shorter amount of time. So while you were building TwoWrite, did you continue to have that sort of contact with people with that need that you described that your partner had, and how did you do that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it really helped that we were very immersed in that world. Algie was still going to work every day in a lab, and all of his friends were scientists. So it did give me, user research on tap for free, which was great. Um, and that prototype, oh my God, it was literally 2 stacks of paper that I would hand people or 2 Word documents. And it was basically like a questionnaire on one side and then really specific examples and teaching materials attached to each question on the other piece of paper. And so initially I did wonder, well, does this method work so well just because I know algae so well? Like, have I just honed it perfectly to him, or is this something that is a bit more applicable? So we went to a few of his lab mates and said, well, are you writing a paper right now? Is there like, can we test this on you? And we had a few different people take us up on the offer. The first was someone who had gone straight from undergrad to PhD, like they hadn't even done a master's. They were also an incredible scientist, but they also had dyslexia. They also had ADHD. They had never written a paper. They were expected to take about 2 years to write their first paper as part of their PhD. And that was their supervisor's estimate. They're like, well, this takes a really long time to learn, really long time to hone. So yeah, we've got 2 years. Handed over this first paper prototype, and 4 weeks later, she had written that paper. It was it was absolutely amazing. And we kept having these little tests. I kept throwing pieces of paper at people. And we had a we had a group of scientists in the US actually. So again, this was Albie's friends. They had been trying to write this paper, and they'd all taken, different sections, and it had taken them literally like 3 years to write most of this paper, and they just needed the abstract and introduction done. And any scientist who's out there has just cringed when I've said it's just the abstract and introduction to go, because those are the nastiest parts. They are the most literary, the most waffly, the bits that, I don't know, it feels like the most marketing-y bits. They do tend to be the hardest parts. They take the longest. So they thought, oh God, it's going to be like another year before we can publish this thing. Handed over the prototype, and I kid you not, literally 4 hours later, they had written the drafts for this abstract and introduction. It was absolutely amazing. And like, I remember getting that message from them. I was sat in a hospital waiting room, like battling with the with the hospital Wi-Fi before I was gonna go in and have a scan. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Frick, send, send, send. Come on, come on. And then trying to calm down enough to, go into an appointment. But yeah, that was a really amazing time. And it was such an organic process for us. And don't get me wrong, like I was a first-time founder. I wasn't doing any of this from a place of, right, best practice is this, so I have to stick to this. This organic process, it led me down the right path organically, because I was seeing all these problems that these scientists were having, some of them literally in tears saying, I am having genuine mental health problems because I can't advance my career until I write this paper. My institute has told me I'm not allowed to take time off until I finish writing. It meant that I had to fall in love with the problem and not the solution, which is the problem that a lot of entrepreneurs have. The solution becomes their baby and not the problem. But being so enmeshed in this world, having our friend group go through all these struggles so visibly, that's it really helped shape how we built TwoWrite.
Yeah, I think it's it's great to hear your your experience of that journey as you're describing, like you're kind of finding your way through it, and you you had the opportunity that which many founders don't, also to kind of get really enmeshed in the system, because you're kind of living it, your friends are living it, you have access to the people that you're designing for.
Now, don't get me wrong, it was still difficult to test with them, because these scientists were wet lab scientists. So I'd be sat there waiting for someone to come to like a user interview, and I'd get a message 45 minutes after when we were supposed to start, going, I'm so sorry, mouse loose. Very expensive mouse. I'm like, okay, well, today's a wash. Great. But yeah, there literally is like, you know, a mouse running about the lab.
um, so you mentioned you had some great feedback. Um, what was the most uncomfortable feedback you've received from the people you designed it for, and how did you respond?
Ooh, most uncomfortable feedback. I think because so we were designing this in 2020, and this is before ChatGPT. And this was a time when scientists were still incredibly anti-AI for writing. Really, really anti-AI. So there was a time when we didn't realize that we had to be really specific with scientists, that this was not AI based. This is purely using psychology to kind of trick your brain into enjoying the process. So we'd reach out to someone and partway through they say, just stop, okay? I don't want to act like a robot, okay? You don't get to steal part of my job. I'm like, what? What? And it was because of a really simple thing in the prototype, like once it was, software, we'd labeled the button that, so just to give you a bit of context, the tool, instead of writing a paper like an essay, you write it as though you're answering a questionnaire. And at the end, your answers all get put together. There's no AI, nothing. It's literally just where you finish one question, the other question gets slotted next to it. But we had put as that button text, the bit that puts it all together, as generate or something. And that was the bit that people saw and they were like, ugh, they're using AI. Ugh, they don't understand scientists. Ugh. We had people hang up on us. We're like, oh, okay, I now need to message them and say it's not AI based. So it was really uncomfortable. And it's been kind of amazing seeing scientists adopt this idea of AI in scientific writing because of how stark it was to even just, 2, 3 years before ChatGPT kind of became popular.
What was the first small test you tried to see if TwoWrite had legs?
The gap between the paper prototypes, which were actively being used by scientists, and actually having it in software form, like there's like a year-long gap there because I'm not technical, so we needed to raise funding. And so I mean we got funding by BGB, and the first thing we did was, right, let's build a software version of this so that we can get that feedback. And so we soft launched at Queen Mary University London, reached out to them on the off chance, on the cadge. I was like, hey, so some of your scientists have been using this paper prototype. We've now made some software. Can we give you guys a free workshop to show you how to use it? And we'll launch with you guys as well. And so we did that workshop. We showed, I think, like 25 scientists how to use it, and we were seeing similar results. So the first software version we did was called TwoWrite Abstract. So we took that really annoying, literary, very condensed bit of writing as like our first free beta because we knew we were going to operate by a freemium model, pretty classic for our industry, for a SaaS product. So it was working for them. They weren't, trying to, boost us up. It wasn't like, oh, this is my friend, so I need to be nice. It was like, no, oh my God, I wish I'd had this sooner. But the real moment where it actually sunk in for me was watching it spread organically. Now, this was at a time when we had no money. We had spent everything on software. So I was doing everything manually, and I was being that classic startup loser where I was watching, 90s films while going through like our user logs and trying to figure out where people were coming from because we didn't have money for fancy analytics. We couldn't see where people were coming from. And so the oh my God moment came from putting those connections together, going, oh, this person here, they work for this consortia. So they must have told this person over here, because that's really the only way it could have spread to this person, because we weren't doing any marketing, literally no marketing. We just wanted to see if we put this out into the world via 2 institutes, do people say, hey, pal, at neighboring institute, you need to check this out? And they were. They actually were. And over the course of literally 6 weeks, it has spread to over 100 institutions around the world. And, we'd see like a librarian log in one week at like a Chinese institution. And then like a week later, like 20 students from that same institution would log in, like, oh, so the librarian must have seen it, gone, oh, this is cool, I'll recommend it. And then all these new students have joined. Watching that organic spread was a real penny drop. Like, oh. oh my God, we're not spending anything on this. And people are saying, hey, you need this. So there was no, I know I keep saying there was no marketing, but like, you know what I mean? Like there was no spiel. There was no, trying to change the narrative. It's no, this thing works. We put two and two together and it seems to be making four.
Does what it says on the tin, right?
Exactly. It helps you
Um,
to write.
exactly.
Sorry, that
uh,
was the stupid pun I came up with. Like that was never meant to be the name, but it pissed off Augie so much. I was chasing him around the house with it. And he was like, "Are we gonna make a science writing revolution too? Right, we will." And it pissed him off so much that it stuck. So that pun is just yeah, that pun was my life for 2 years.
that's excellent. Um, before you exited to Springer Nature, what was the last test you ran?
So it was that test. I mean, it was literally 2 months after that soft launch that we started getting acquisition offers. And I trace that back to a doorknob question that I asked my mentor John Hammersley from Overleaf. Like literally just as he was about to hang up our call, I was like, "Oh wait, do you know any journalists?" Um, and that's when he introduced me to the editor of Research Information. We did our interview. I had that very bizarre moment. I was walking around my garden, got a message from Tim saying, "Don't freak out, but you're on the cover of the the magazine." I was like, "Oh." um, so that went out, and then that was when we started getting all those acquisition offers. Yeah, that's how fast it happened.
And was that intentional, or is that organic?
It was all organic. I didn't have the experience to be really strategic about it. I was learning as fast as humanly possible, but
Hmm.
there was no point in me trying to out chess more experienced founders when at that time I was still trying to learn checkers, you know?
Yes,
So
yes.
far, riding that organic wave had been the best way to to be successful. Like if we were making users happy, then we were going to succeed. If we were able to keep like a really positive, like, friendly relationship with institutions, we were going to succeed. Like just just trying things, being a bit of a cadger, being a bit of a trier, it really, really worked. None of this was particularly strategic. It was simply, I wonder if. I wonder if this thing could work. I wonder if people would respond to this idea and just trying something. And that is also the privilege of the first time founder. Because you don't necessarily know what success looks like, you don't really know what failure looks like either. So even if you're screwing up about 100 times a day, you don't see it. So it doesn't impact your mood or your motivation.
Hmm.
So it means that you can just keep moving forward. You can have that momentum. And yeah, none of it was hugely strategic. It was just experimenting.
How, when you were building out the product, did you decide what was next and what was the next test you were going to do?
It was kind of a mix of two things. So it
Hmm.
was, user and customer feedback. How often am I hearing things? Because for the majority of the time, I was a solo founder, so I wasn't really writing things down. I was just I was listening to these people, active listening, letting it all absorb and letting that guide what I did next. Because if that's the thing that's still itching at me and I still want to know, it's because I'll have heard it 50 times that week going, "Hey, can we have this? Hey, can we have this?" The other side was investor priorities because we'd raised our pre-seed round with Bethnal Green Ventures. Fantastic. We raised small, but that's all we needed at that point. But our next round, in order to expand from TwoWrite abstracts to TwoWrite papers, we needed to raise a significantly more chunky round. So again, just being a trier, just reaching out to investors going, "Hey, can I have 5 minutes of your time, please?" And saying, "Well, if I were to come to you and say, I'm trying to raise this much, and here are current proof points, what am I missing? How hard are you laughing me out of that room? What would make you stop laughing? And having that list of proof points. So it was weighing those two things up. It was making sure that I mean, that's where it became a bit more strategic because when you're talking big money, that you do have to be a bit more strategic. Unfortunately, by that point, I had gotten a bit more experience. I'm lucky that I'm a really fast learner. So that was those two kind of sides dovetailing.
That's lovely. Um, I like the way that you describe the way that you approach the investors and said, "What is it going to take to not laugh me out of the room?" I'm paraphrasing what you said. I think it's a lovely approach, just being open and straight up about it, right? I think something interesting in that.
It's one of those things that you can't take too seriously, because I don't like on a darker note, I was 25. I'm I, I'm a woman, so they weren't taking me that seriously anyway. So what did I have to lose? I can pump them for information. Like if I'm trying not to say the quiet part out loud, but if they weren't going to take me too seriously, like to begin with, then I didn't need to really protect myself there. I could just say, right, what proof points do I need and not be, trying to present myself a certain way. I could save that for when, okay, I've got my checklist. I've got that all completed. Now I'm going in earnest. Now I'm gonna, do the bit of razzle dazzle.
Yeah, thank you for that. Experimenting experimenting isn't just about moving things forwards, it's also about knowing when to pause or let something go. Was there a time you chose to hold back and you're glad you did?
Yeah. So originally, we were raising a much larger pre-seed round. I mean, we raised something like 55K in the end because that's what we needed. But originally, we were raising 400K because we wanted to go straight into building TwoWrite papers. And actually, I think a lot of it was your influence, and I have to say a massive thank you to you for that because you made us realize that the simpler we made our first beta product, the easier it was going to be and the cheaper it was going to be, the more sustainable it was going to be to keep tweaking as we learned things. So an abstract, it's basically a paper imaged in little. You've got the first couple sentences, that's the introduction. Next couple sentences, methods. Next couple sentences, discussion. And then you've got the conclusion. That's it. So we realized that we could get this user experience concentrated down just to two write abstracts without having to pay, the couple 100,000 to get this first version of the software off the ground. It meant that we had the room to iterate. So I'm really glad we pulled back on those two things, on our funding goals and also on our initial prototype. Starting simple and starting the most concentrated spot worked so well for us. Even though users were really disappointed, they wanted the full paper thing immediately, which actually gave us a really good starting point for our next funding round. We could say, well, we've got an abstract writer, and we know that we need to make a paper writer because people are literally taking the mickey with our software. They're using it to write full papers. Like this abstract is supposed to be like what, 300 words, and they've turned it into a 6,000 word document. We know they need it because they're already butchering my software to do it.
Exactly. They've been hacking, finding their way around. And that's a great
Yeah.
signal as well, isn't it? Like you had to do like low capital expenditure, lower effort, and you can still get a signal for the value. Um,
Exactly. We got all the signals that we really, really needed at a fraction of a cost. And I'm so glad we did that because I mean, especially especially if you try to raise too much money initially, we weren't worth the amount that we would have had to in order for me to have retained control of TwoWrite in order to raise 400k. We wouldn't have given ourselves any breathing room for more investment, and that's then a red flag to further investors. Like
Mm,
we would have been scuppered.
yeah. How do you build reflection into your way of working as a founder?
It's tricky. It is really tricky because in that first startup, I drunk the Kool-Aid real hard. Like I was lost in the sauce. There wasn't a huge amount of time for reflection. And I do like to talk about this, not because it's pleasant for me to talk about, but because there has to be a founder out there who's finding themselves slipping into the same mistake. And that was I got so lost in the startup that I didn't have time to reflect. I didn't have time to breathe. In the end, I was leaving the house maybe once a month for like a 20-minute coffee with a friend. I was I was working 100-hour weeks, and it made like I'm so lucky that I didn't make any major screw ups. I'm lucky that we had such an organic start that kind of shielded me from making those sleep deprived decisions. But I mean, in the end, and this was the moment that I realized that something had gone a bit wrong in the way that I was building this startup. I stood up from a meeting with my investors, and I collapsed. I was suffering clinical exhaustion, and even when I was taking begrudgingly a day off to relax and recuperate, I still couldn't get far enough away from the idea of the startup, all the things that I was thinking of to be able to reflect. But the way that I'm able to now build ventures and products, the way that I reflect is by honestly having multiple things on the go. I know that I'm an obsessive person, but I need to have multiple things, because if your life is this one thing, then you have a bad day at work, then it's a bad life. That's what it feels like. You need to be able to get distance so that you can reflect on it, so that you can look at it as the world sees it, not just as this swirling maelstrom all around your head.
Yeah, I think that's very, very good sound advice for any first time founders, even
Yeah.
some second, third time founders as well, right? Um, what's the bravest decision you've made after starting TooWrite, and what did you learn from it?
Bravest decision. Um, so many of these decisions, like they look brave in retrospect, but a lot of it was because I didn't know any better. I didn't know what I was in for. I didn't know that it was brave because I was just going tra la 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 la, one step in front of the other. It's fine. But I think once I did get more experienced, I think that's when you can start maybe labeling some of the stuff as brave. And I think saying yes to that acquisition was the brave moment. And then needing to represent myself, my company, my shareholders in an acquisition with a Goliath corporation like Springer Nature, that took a lot of guts. Having to having to reply back to corporate lawyers and say, no, I want this. No, I'm not moving on that. That was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And that was 6 months. It was like, oh, it'll be 1 month. I'll get over it. It was 6 months. Like, I had a phone call so stressful, I literally gave myself a black eye. I don't know if I rubbed it or a blood vessel just burst, but I walked in front of a mirror. I was like, oh my God, I've got a black eye from stress.
Oh, mate.
Like, it was like a proper like panda eye. I was like, I oh. So having to having to fight for yourself and your company and what your shareholders deserve for believing in you during an acquisition where you feel so alone and so small compared to this enormous corporation, that was terrifying. But but we got through it. We managed it.
And what gave you the confidence to make that call?
Oh, you know that is it a poem or a book? But it's we're going on a bear hunt thing. It was that moment of like, well, we can't go around it, we can't go under it. We just have to get through it, and that was it. That there was no other option. You just got to get through it. You just keep on living until you feel alive again. And at a certain point, you do just become a little bit numb to the fear. So that was it. It was also a lot of bloody mindedness. Lawyers sending over things. I was like, not having that. Where's my red pen? But honestly, it was also the people in Springer Nature who were championing this this acquisition. That was really, really amazing. There were two people in particular who every time I was having a bit of a wobble, bit of a worry, even though they they were incredibly important in this giant corporation, I could just call them and say, I'm personally having a bit of a wobble. I'm having a worry. Can you just sit and talk to me for a little bit? And they would. It was amazing. And like we had multiple acquisition offers at that time, but it was those two people that led to me saying yes to Springer Nature and not a different publisher or a different company because that human support was there. It wasn't totally adversarial. It was just, no, we're going to get through this and we've got your back.
Well, that's lovely to hear that even the organization that was acquiring you, you felt as though they had your back. Well, they did
Yeah.
have your back, not even felt as though they had your
Yeah,
back.
now they own
Because
my back.
exactly. Talking about back, looking back, how do you think those moments shape the way you lead today?
So I think I think a lot of the really formative moments of reflection actually came from investor conversations. So I think a lot of founders or a lot of people working in organizations with stakeholders, when they get negative feedback, it's a very personal thing. And I know founders can really connect with that idea. Like someone's criticizing your baby. Someone's called your baby ugly. You're going to take that really personally. And in your head, you're going to be saying, you're wrong. I hate you. I'm going to find somebody else who's going to get it. Realizing that feedback, it's almost never personal, that you can be quite, I don't know, clinical about it. You can say, right, I got negative feedback. And there are a few different reasons why I might have gotten it. A, have I misexplained something? Do I need to change the way that I'm explaining it? B, have they is there something genuinely wrong with what I'm doing? What exactly are the words that they're feeding back to me? How can I make it better? It doesn't need to be a personal thing. You can accept the feelings and say, yes, I'm feeling hurt right now, but again, this is where you have to fall in love with the problem and not the solution. They're not criticizing your baby because your baby is not your startup. Your baby is the problem, and they're helping you solve that problem more by giving you that feedback. So that's really changed the way I view feedback. I look at it much more clinically without tamping down those emotions because, your emotions are valid, but you get to choose your behavior.
And how does that feedback culture turn up in the way that you work with the members of your team then and now?
Yeah, so I mean, particularly now, I mean, I work in a large corporate, so it is a political place. You know, feedback, it can be a double-edged sword. So there was a moment recently, and it really makes me laugh looking back at it now because someone called me a typical Pisces the other day and was like, "Oh yeah, you feel your feelings." Like, yeah, I do. Um, some like a very senior stakeholder gave me a bit of feedback, and it was really harsh. It was, oh, like you could see other people in that meeting cringing, going, "Oh my God, he's eviscerating her." I got so angry that I closed my laptop. I didn't react to him. I closed my laptop after the end of the meeting. I picked up my pickaxe and I dug a new hedge in the garden. Whether I needed a new hedge is neither here nor there, but I needed those feelings to get out of me. I then went back to him a couple of days later and said, "Right, I've gone through your feedback and here's what I'm doing about it. This. And he went, "Oh my God, I did not, I didn't mean for any of that to sound so harsh. I'm really sorry. This, please don't be upset." I'm like, "I'm not upset. You can see from my face that I'm not upset. I'm just asking you, are these bullet points right?" And it has helped so much with the way I was doing my job, like being able to feel my feelings, not tamp them down, and then, curdle up and then affect that relationship. So I felt my feelings privately, and then I went back with a clinical mindset of like, right, you've given me 1,000 angry words, but there are 50 words here that are important, and now I'm going to confirm them with you, and we're going to move forward together because we're all on the same team. That's really, really helped. Like that is the best skill, I think, that like it's the best skill that can be in your toolkit.
Yeah, and I think that applies for many things just beyond work as well. I'm not sure if you agree. It's like those moments when your emotions check in with you really hard. You're like, well, this is an
Yeah,
opportunity to learn and grow. Or do I just shut down and just kind of put it under the carpet or something? Um, and those learning
exactly.
moments, if you can be open to them, they'll just help you and the team or people around you just move forwards, right?
Exactly. And I do think it is still a question of balance. You don't want to in a professional environment, like you can have passion, but you can't necessarily be overly emotional because we're all different people. We're all different people from different walks of life. This isn't RuPaul's best friend race. We're here because we have a unique set of skills. I'm bringing out so many movie references right now, and I'm taking off without places to land here. But you need to feel your feelings and let them out. But not in a way that's going to negatively affect your team. You can't be calling people out every single day and saying, "Hey, you didn't reply to my email fast enough and that hurt my feelings." Like that just doesn't work. Like having that more clinical approach after you let the emotions out, that I think is the sweet spot.
You shared how you reflect and grow and plant a bush with a pickaxe. I'd love to zoom out now. What impact has all of this had actually on someone's life? Can you share with the listeners one story of someone whose life has been changed by TooWrite and what changed for them?
So I'm gonna come back to Algie because at the center of all of this is Algie. He was the inspiration. He was, my strength and stay for the whole startup. Well, the the first the first piece of writing that TwoWrite helped to, bring into the world, that was the piece of writing that he submitted for his PhD, and that's what made him pass his Viva. He now has his doctorate because of that. And but that that doctorate, that piece of paper that he made using TwoWrite, that also impacted both of us because on his acknowledgements page, he said, a massive thank you to all my lab mates, thank you to my supervisor. And then right at the bottom, it said, Ivy Cavendish, will you marry me?
Oh, isn't that lovely? That's so that's so nice.
Yeah,
And
that got published.
and
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, here's the ring.
oh, amazing. Um, so let's just dive back into the product here now. So walk me through what happens between the first use and the early signals of impact.
So it's interesting thinking about first signals, and I've got a really visual memory like in mind. I was testing with a scientist, and we were just on, I think it was Zoom in those days, days of lockdown, and she was in the lab, and she had told me that she tried to write an abstract like 20 times. It was a beast of a paper, and it was a really small word count, absolute nightmare. So she had 20 drafts discarded, and she's like, "Look, it takes me ages to start. You're gonna be sat here for freaking ages waiting for me to go, oh, that's the first word." Um, and she had one of those laptop cameras that's really close to the keyboard. So we started the test. She read the first question, and the exact opposite thing that she thought would happen. All of a sudden, she went, and her fingers started flying. All I could see was like her fingers because of that low camera. And it was literally 15, 20 minutes flat. She'd written a draft. It was in the word count. Like she'd been trying to write this horrible draft for like a month. And those questions had guided her through exactly what she needed to write. And that was one of the big impact signals for me when I was doing these these more guided tests. It was how quick are people to start? Because that was the big issue that scientists had originally when they were starting their papers. It's that blank page. It's that little space bar that keeps winking at you like you're doing something wrong. It's the devil. We hated it. Whereas this, you don't have a blank page. There are already so many words on the page, and it's just, one blank space bar. That's it. And it was how quick they were starting. They were picking up the mantle. They were putting words on the page, ready to refine. That was one of them. The second was how quickly they finished, because I mean, writing an abstract from start to finish, all the drafting and redrafting, the angry backspacing, the crying, the eating ice cream in front of the freezer, it takes about 6 weeks. It it was a nightmare. But seeing how quickly people were able just to sit down, smash out an abstract in a few minutes flat, that was an incredible signal. And the next was watching their face at the end going, I can't believe I just did that. And then the angry look on their face going, it could not have been that easy all along. I have not suffered all these years going, it could not have been that easy. Actually, that is literally what Algie said that first time when we were both looking at this literature review he'd written, going, it could not have been that easy all along. So yeah, those were the important signals in the early days.
Those early signals, from those, the impact's like relatively short. And let's frame impact here in this context around maybe publishing the paper, like it's gone out into the world, and it itself is probably having impact depending on the content, obviously.
Yeah.
But how long was that, or how long is that now?
It's so tricky. It was really difficult for us to say, okay, well, look at this paper. It's here, like between, in like a few months flat because of TooWrite, because there were two things making publishing of scientific data slow. The first was the writing period, that's about 18 months, sometimes, like 3 years. And the next was the actual publishing process, which can also take 9 to 18 months. So remember, our journey was only 2 years long. So the big success signal, the big impact metric that we had was, look at this amazing PhD thesis. that was published. That was the big one. And then we had, conference abstracts. And it was quite easy to describe the impact to investors because all of the scientists I was working with, they were cancer researchers. You don't need to over explain the impact of publishing cancer research like
Mm-hmm.
that. It's pretty bloody obvious. So even just being able to say, look, this scientist wasn't going to go to this conference because they couldn't face writing yet another abstract and failing, but they used TwoWrite abstracts and now they've gone. People have seen their work. That was like a 20,000 person conference. They've seen that abstract now. Like that's dissemination happening. Like that was, yeah, that was the simplest way for us to describe it. But yeah, those publishing timelines really killed us on our, cool metrics. I wanted to go to investor meetings, go like, look at all these papers.
Over the 2 years before acquisition, how did you make sure that the impact grew as your product evolved and that you stayed true to your purpose?
Well, I think getting engaged to and living with a scientist, i.e., my core user, really helped. Because if I came to him and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about this cool idea," he would instantly call bullshit. I'm like, "Scientists don't want that." Having having so many people who were cheerleading us and who really wanted to be involved in its growth, it did mean that I had, a pool full of users that I could question all the time. I could always do my litmus test with them. So staying really, really close to that core user helped keep the impact and the values aligned.
So now onto the lightning round. What's a permission slip you give to yourself or your team?
If your brain just isn't working that day, don't try to force it. You're only going to exhaust yourself further. Your brain is the captain of its own ship. Like if it needs to rest, let it rest.
When you were building TwoWrite, whose voice were you most afraid to lose as you grew?
The simple answer is the researcher, but I had a really specific researcher in mind. It was a composite of all the researchers who felt like they were, I don't want to say being bullied out of science, out of the career they loved because that career had decided that they also needed to be great writers. But the scientists who were literally sobbing in interviews with me saying, I've been put on a trigger warning suicide watch list because I am so emotionally depleted. I am so mentally exhausted. And I've told my institute this, but they've told me I'm not allowed to take time off until I finish writing my paper. It wasn't the superstar scientist. It wasn't, the hero author that writes hundreds of papers over the course of their career. It was that brilliant genius scientist. You leave them alone at a lab bench and they will accomplish miracles, but you ask them to write a paper, they fall down. That was the person I didn't want to lose because their voice is so incredibly important. And modern science, it 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 felt like it was crushing it. So that was the voice that I didn't want to lose.
The last thing you changed your mind about?
Maybe having jalapenos with every meal is not a good idea. My tummy hurts.
um, the most recent thing you learned about your customers?
Just because it's a professional relationship doesn't mean that you shouldn't be treating them like they're human. If you spot a dog in like their background on a call, comment on the dog. Have a really human, light-hearted moment because people remember emotions, not facts. They're not going to remember your sales pitch. They're going to remember when they met someone that they really enjoyed talking to.
As you grow as a founder, a researcher, innovation guru, startup founder, coach, What's the one thing you'll never compromise on?
Accessibility is definitely one of them because if you make something accessible, it just makes it better for everyone. I don't care if if the colors white and yellow came to you in a dream and that's what your software has to look like. It's not accessible. Don't bloody do it. Nobody likes dealing with that. If you make something more accessible, it's more accessible to everyone. So your product's going to be better. So if you say, no, North Star is accessibility, your product's always going to be better.
When you think of scale, do you picture businesses growing bigger or the actual problem getting smaller?
There's a really specific way that I view this. So if you've done the job right, it should almost feel like that problem was never there to begin with. Like you've headed it off at the path, so now that problem just doesn't really exist.
If you could whisper something to your earlier self just before you started TooWrite, what would you say?
Buy Bitcoin. Kidding. Kidding. It literally crashed today, so definitely don't buy Bitcoin. What would I whisper to myself? Go outside and touch grass more often. The more you insulate yourself inside the problem, inside the startup, the smaller your world will become and the more challenged your perspective will become. Getting that distance, going out and seeing people, it's not laziness. It's not proving that you don't deserve success. It's refilling the well from which you need to draw from during the week. So stop working in the evenings, stop working at the weekends, stop waking up butt naked at 3 o'clock in the morning and running down to the office and doing more startup things. Like that happens so many times. Like I was always on to the point where even when I was asleep, my brain was still like, oh, had an idea. Let's wake her up because she's going to run downstairs because she still considers herself to be on the clock. It was a very long whisper, but yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story so far. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you today. Before we wrap, where can people find out more about you, Ivy, and connect with you?
So LinkedIn's probably the easiest. My full name is Ivy Cavendish. Keep an eye out for the thumbnail with lots of curly red hair. That's me.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening, and leave a quick 5-star rating or a short review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps more people discover these stories from the reflective impact entrepreneurs who are building ventures that do good and do well.